The Steam team is an interesting and controversial subject amongst Thomas and Friends fans. Some fans say it was good for the show, others not so much. But what do I think? Is the Steam team a good idea or a bad idea? Before I start, I just want to say that I will be covering the Big World, Big Adventures Steam team, because that's where the controversy really started to kick in. I personally had no problem with the Steam team concept up until this point, and I don't think a lot of the fans did either until Big World, Big Adventures. So that's what I'm going to be focusing on today. These are all my own personal opinions. Your thoughts will probably differ than mine. It's the one thing that makes the Thomas fandom so unique. Let me know down in those comments if you think the Steam team helped or hindered the show. All I ask is that you be respectful, and above all, enjoy the video. Okay, let's dive in, and as I normally do, I'll start with the pros. In principle, that was a good idea. A lot of people have said this in the fandom, that the idea of a Steam team is a good thing if it was executed properly. But most of the fandom had the problem with the way it was executed rather than the idea itself. Unlucky Tug had talked about this in his extensive Thomas and Friends Blubba video, which I do recommend you check out. And he gave quite a good idea of how they could have done series 22 to 24 in this format, hit all the bullet points they needed to hit, and not had the fans roundly turn against them. It's an idea that the YouTuber ThomasFan2002 has developed into his own Big World, Big Adventure style series, and the execution of it has been very widely received with positive praise rather than negative praise. I will leave a link to his channel in the description of this video if you wish to check out the series for yourself. But it does show you that if taken the right time and had the proper execution, the idea was sound. My next point is that diversity is a good thing. A lot of people jumped on the bandwagon of the characters of Nia and Rebecca in particular being added for diversity's sake. Adding girl character or foreign girl character just to hit those bullet points. And once again, this lies in the premise rather than the execution. The idea of having more gender equality and diversity in Thomas and Friends is a sound and positive step forward. They had been trying to do that in the series from season 7 onwards, really. The Hit era really strived to add more female characters. So did the Nitrogen era and the Brenner eras. But again, it's all down to the execution. It felt like because they were being pushed to do this, that they dug their heels in and said, okay, we'll just add these characters because we can add the characters, but we'll never do anything with them, and they'll just be blank slate generic female characters or generic foreign characters. With the exceptions of characters such as Hero and Victor, two foreign engine characters that weren't solely defined by their race, but were given proper emotional depth and character development. So as proof that if done right, diversity is a very good thing for a show. And speaking of that diversity, I liked Nia at first. I know a lot of people tend to rag on the Big World, Big Adventures movie. And while I admit it's not the best movie of the franchise, I didn't mind Nia's introduction in that movie. Sure, a lot of it was very on the nose and in your face, but again, the premise was sound. The idea was a good one. It wasn't done out of spite or badness. It's just as the series went on that it kind of went downhill. But having Nia introduced in this way wasn't the worst way a character was introduced. Looking at you, Login Locals. And finally, some of the Steam team-centric stories were good. I'm not saying they were great, just saying they were good. They weren't ones that made me want to slam my head off a wall. They also weren't ones that made me shout in joy. I have mentioned at the time of this recording I haven't seen all of the Thomas and Friends series just yet, but when my kids were very young, baby toddler Mark, and I was desperately trying to get them into Thomas and Friends, I would put on Channel 5's Milkshake in the morning when I was up with them. And the Big World, Big Adventures era was still prominent on Channel 5 in the UK at the time. Those were the episodes that they watched. Those are the episodes that now, at the time of this recording, they watch on Netflix and they have a soft spot for. So while some of the episodes I can be a bit grumpy about in my old age, shall we say, I can see why my kids like them. And I'll take them over All Engines Go any chance I get. It's the whole thing of you don't appreciate what you've got until it's gone. And I think Blubba does have that thing going for it. Or at least it will eventually if the franchise stays in its current guise. Okay, I've done my positive points and now I'm going to go into my cons. And sadly, it comes back to the diverse characters, in the sense that that was all they were known for. Rebecca just became bland girl character with no redeeming features or character flaws or anything that made her a rounded personality. And Nia sadly just became known for being the foreign engine. And I really hated that, because I did like Nia at first. I thought there was potential there with character development and growth. The same kind of ideas that the Unlucky Tug had about saying, maybe she could be suffering from culture shock coming to a new island and having to deal with a new way of working. I thought that was the route that they were going to go down, but no, they didn't. I understand that maybe they're trying to appease the basic level audience of babies and toddlers, but you're just reinforcing those negative stereotypes into young people. So when they grow up, all they're going to think about is those negative stereotypes. I've mentioned potential quite a few times right now, and that is a con as well as a pro, because there was potential there that was very much limited. And I think this was around the whole fact of Thomas going around the world. Once again, the premise is sound and has potential, but the execution was really bad, aside from some episodes here and there. And it also limited the potential of more development on the island of Sodor. Once again, not intentional, it's just how it happened. There are some gems in there, but the way that I could equate it to is like eating fast food. You're glad to get it, you enjoy it at the time, and then afterwards you feel empty because you've not really gained any sustenance from it. And that was because character development went right out of the window. Character development is something that you hear me harp on about a lot on this channel, and it's because I love to see the journeys of characters. I'm from an acting background. I loved plays and movies and films because I wanted to see the character go on a journey, a beginning, a middle, a climax, and an end. And finding a character is totally different at the end of their journey and the start of their journey. And seeing those changes stick and progress, if you're watching a TV series, the next episode, or the next season. Thomas and Friends had that in the classic seasons from seasons 1 to 7. Hit did a reboot, seasons 8 to 12, a little bit of character development, not much. Nitrogen era, zero character development. Then the Brenner era gave us that back. Sure, it was kind of flanderized character development, but it was character development nonetheless. Well-rounded stories, characters that had clear journey, and they learned something by the end, most of the time. And then when they hit the refresh with Blubber, all that was gone. There was no real moving forward or moving back in terms of character development. There was no progression or regression. It was just, you're stuck in the middle. Here's something that happens today. Here's something that happens tomorrow. What have we learned? Deadly squat. And since I am talking about characters, I can't not talk about the removal of Henry and Edward. You'll have heard it in every other channel that is either a lifelong fan of the franchise or around my age. So I'm sorry that you're going to hear the same story beats over again, but for anybody that's new to my channel, let me reinforce these story beats. Edward and Henry, two of the original three that were in the first book of the Railway series when it was published on the 12th of May, 1945. And by the time it gets to the end of season 21, Edward is removed from the main cast. But that was much better than what Henry got. Henry got one throwaway line of dialogue saying that he was going to stay at Vickerstown, and that was that. One of the best characters, the most well-developed, well-rounded characters of both the Railway series and the TV show, and he just gets wrote out with one piece of dialogue? That ticked a lot of the fans off even more, and caused more hate and vitriol towards this era of the franchise. And it caused a lot of people to say, I'm done with this show. Which led to my final point. It killed the franchise. They tried to hit the refresh button on Thomas and Friends a lot during its franchise run. Hit era the refresh was adding Emily to the cast and restoring some factory settings. Nitrogen era, hit refresh. We're now in CGI and it's a completely different timeline. Brenner era, hit refresh. We're now going back to the way that we used to do it in the classic seasons for a CGI time period. With Blubber, they hit that refresh button quite a lot. Refresh, replace Edward and Henry. Refresh, add new girl characters. Refresh, add in the god-awful body movements. Refresh, Thomas is now the narrator and breaks the fourth wall. And by the time they hit the refresh button one more time to just amplify, all the colours and the fact that he's going on these big adventures around the world, I think they pretty much broke the refresh button. They threw so much at you with this change, they couldn't roll with those punches anymore. We were punch drunk. And when you change a franchise so much in such a short space of time, it's going to cause people to get franchise fatigue and decide, it had a good run, but I am done. So do I think that the Steam Team premise from the Big World Big Adventures era was a good point or a bad point? It had good points in it, but it was ultimately a bad point. It killed the franchise and the guys that we were used to. It performed that badly that they went, we are out of season 25, we're going to hit the refresh button again, and they hit it to the point where someone thought we had dropped a nuclear bomb on the franchise when we saw those first all engines go images. There's proof, if you look online, that these concepts could have been done in a very smart way that wasn't pandering to your audience, new or long running, and still create quality content. But it required time, it required patience, and it required people who truly loved the franchise. And by that point, the franchise had none of them. But those are only my thoughts. Let me know in the comments what you think of the Steam Team premise from the Big World, Big Adventures era. Did you find good points in it as well? Or was it just irredeemable in your eyes? Let me know in those comments below. And until next time, keep on jugging.